Today I'm going to talk about the man of covenant, Abraham. And I have titled it The Covenant Time, the time of the covenant, Kairos. In our Korean culture, they used to call Korean time, because most of us always come to a meeting late. But now these days, modern day, Koreans are very famous for 빨리빨리, like hurry up, you know. And the time became very important, and being on clock has been very important. And so now we have like Indian time. Other culture people who are very laid back, and then their culture is actually it's nice to come late, you know, 15 minutes. And so time has been a very important thing for our culture. But actually for the Greeks, they seems like have the same concept, same idea. And so they use three different vocabulary words to describe the time. Hola is one word describing that, the specific appointed hour. They use that word. And kairos is a opportune time. The time that has not arrived yet. It is kind of unknown to the person who's waiting for the time. It's a special time. And so that's kairos, the word, the kairos. So that is one word that we're going to focus on today. And the other one is chronos. Chronos is actually it's a 24-hour clock. It's the time that moves on very constantly in one direction, from past to present to the future. That is what we live in. Right, everybody's busy, and you go to work, and 8 hours start here and then end here. That's Chronos time typically. That's the word they use. Today, we're gonna stay on the word time, Kairos, because many times how God works with His people works in this very special time, opportune time. It's the time that has not arrived yet. It's to us, it's kind of unknown. And if you would think about it in general, we can make this statement, because every time, even Chronos or horror time, it's all unknown to us, because we do not know what will happen the next second, right? If you would think about it. But when God approaches His people and He gives a covenant, mostly it works in this time, Kairos. So that's the key word that we want to work on today. We're going to dive into a story of Abraham. This is Abraham. So his previous name before he became Abraham. We call him man of covenant because God came to him at the age of 75. He gave him the covenant. And his promise is that he will become a blessing. Not only he will become a blessing, but he will become a blessing to all nations, all tribes. Well, and then God came and asked him to take a journey, leave his home, his hometowns and relatives and his father's house, and go to this unknown place that He's going to show him. And so he packed everything and left, actually without knowing where. So along the way, God showed him it was the promised land, the land of Canaan that we know of historically. Well, that's the kind of journey he began at the age of 75. Today's story is happening after he settled in this land, the land of promised land. Later on, we're going to talk about a little bit more, but the land of Canaan, that 10 years passed. In this 10 years past, that there's many things happening. We know that actually Abraham and Sarah, they were deported from his cousin? Lot. They were together all along. It's the son of his brother. And they were together. It's for Abraham, his son, to him. But they were deported because the belongings were too many. the cows and herds and everything was too many, so they couldn't be one place. So their servants were fighting. So actually it wasn't a good departure. It was kind of like, maybe there was some resentment and things. So they were departed. And Abraham asked him to choose the land. So he chose the best land, that is land that is like in the east side of the Jordan River, currently in Palestine, east side of the Jordan River, that fertile land. He chose that land, so he moved out there. So Abraham, he ended up with the Rocky Mountain area, which is currently the Palestine, Jordan River, west side. So he occupied, and therefore that is the land of Canaan. So he settled there in 10 years. I already told you, many things happened. Well, first thing is, there was a great war took place. There was many tribes living in the land, but also there was empires, north and then south. And somehow they got together and they created a united forces to deal with the Sodom and Gomorrah, the people who lived in east side of the Jordan River, where Lot was living. And the united force, the kings, they won the war. And so the people in Sodom and Gomorrah, they were captives. And among the captives, guess who was there? Lot was there. When Abraham heard this, he took his 318 men, and then went to fight with this united force. And he did win the war. This is a miracle, actually. He went after these united forces who defeated the Sodom and Gomorrah kings, and he went back and then won that war, and then he confiscated all the things, the men and women, the captives, and then of course the animals, and then all the belongings. And the king of Sodom obviously came welcoming him, and also there was a God's prophet, Melchizedek, who came with wine and bread and then welcomed him. So in 10 years, by just listening to this history of what took place, you can say, did Abraham make his life? Was he successful in the last 10 years? Can you imagine somebody who was moving along, here and there, in 10 years, he had his 318 soldiers, men, who can fight for him. Can you imagine this man had to feed them, train them? 318 men. So in 10 years, in my opinion, he became wealthy and very strong enough to be almost to the king of the tribe that he's living in 10 years. But he wasn't happy. That's what I'm going to talk about. He wasn't happy. You know why? Because he had no child of his. This is 85, at the age of 85. Well, guess what? It wasn't just Abraham who wasn't happy. It was his wife, Sarah, wasn't happy with the situation, because they probably said to themselves, God is not keeping his promise. Because he was 10 years old, God gave them the promise. But still, they have no kids. I mean, they're running out of time. Can you imagine that? Actually, Sarah is 9 years younger than Abraham. So Abraham is 85, she is 76. I mean, her factory is already closed. And she knows that her husband is getting old. Right? And so, any normal, ordinary person would think the same way Sarah did. We can't wait. My husband, Abraham, he cannot have a child if we wait too long. So what she decided was that we're going to have a child with, what do you call it, surrogate mom? Is that what the English word? Yeah, that's the word, right? Yeah. That's what they decided to have. You know, when Abraham sell off her wife to King Pharaoh in Egypt, the king gave them a lot of good things, the animals and everything, but along with that, he gave them the slaves, men and women slaves. One of the lady slave, Sarah, chose had to be Abraham's partner, basically. And that's what happened. Heckel, she became the concubine in the ruler. And so they set the date, and then the date passed, and that things happened. Well, while this was happening, what I was kind of intriguing to what is happening with all the things is that Abraham, the man of covenant, who had received directly from God the covenant, and actually prior to even this incident, that God constantly appeared to him and told him that he will keep the promise. And so actually he appeared to him right before he settled in the land of Canaan. And actually even before this chapter 16, chapter 15, there's with all that actually God came to him and told him that, I'm going to give you your own descendant. Your own child. And out of your child, it's not only just few, but he took him outside and showed him the skies and then let him see the stars. This many you will have your descendant. But that wasn't enough. Actually, it seems like Aaron really didn't believe for whatever reason. And God asked him, why don't you bring a pairs of animals, the cows and all this, and cut them in half and lay it there and wait for the darkness. So Abraham did that. He had animals and cut them in half, and then there was some bird too, but bird was whole piece. They couldn't chop them. But anyway, wait for the darkness to arrive, and then as he was waiting, he got tired. So he fell in sleep. But we don't know exactly what happened. Is it sleep? So it means it's a dream? Or is it that he's tired, that he saw a vision? But he doesn't describe what it is exactly. But what happened is he see a torch of fire passing through these parted animal bodies. Well, that torch of fire symbolizes the presence of God. That's what God has done. God came and passed through this parted animal. Well, you have to understand in those day culture, as they are making any kind of contracts or covenant, they did this parting the animal, and then those people who are participating in the contract, they walk through and to telling each other that if I break the covenant or the contract, I deserve to die as these animals have parted. That's what it meant. Because can you imagine God himself kind of create this drama to tell Abraham what? That he is very serious about his covenant. That he will mean it, that he will keep it. This just happened prior to this event that it is happening here. Right now, Abraham and Sarah is creating a concubine and surrogate mom, and then all this is happening. Can you imagine that? So out of all this, there's three things that I see Abraham had an issue. So before we dive into the main passage, let's read the passage together so that it gives you the whole stories you can remember. All right, let's do this. Let's all together read together these 10 verses. Let's begin. Hagar and Ishmael, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian middle servant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Your servant is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to the shore. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarah. She answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. Then angel added, I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. So there's three things I'm going to share of what were the mistakes of Abraham. First one, he forgot who the ultimate perfecter of the covenant of God. As Sarai, she planned this out. He really didn't say much. He went along with her plan. What does that mean? He agreed with her perspective, her point of view, her decision. That he is tired of waiting for the covenant of God to be fulfilled by God. Maybe he gave up, saying, it's not happening, it's too late. You see, Abraham couldn't wait. But I already explained to you, it was God who came to him, reminding time after time that he is serious about this covenant that he made with Abraham. But he couldn't. And so it's kind of odd. The last contract that the torch fire covenant happened just recently, right before this story actually. And how could one forget about it? Well, I couldn't understand. How could one truly forget about what he just saw, what God has revealed to him, and then do this such foolish act? Do you have any answer to this? How is it possible? How is it possible? Well, I couldn't find the answer. And you know what? I meditated on this and then I realized that's what's happening to us too. You see, his problem was not the lack of God's presence. His problem wasn't that that covenant wasn't revealed to him clear enough. The same way we, as a man of God, our struggle is not because of the lack of presence of God. It's not that grace of God is not upon us. It just happens because we are so focused on what? The time of promise, 24 hours. We became the slave to this hour, the clock. It seems that we believe something has to happen. But God had his own time, the Kairos time, opportune time that God set his own time in our will of life actually. I know young people, I know you guys probably struggle in this sense, that what do I do in my life, right? But guess what? I'm going to give you bad news. Even you get into the college you want, even you get a job you want, even you marry to the wife or husband you want, even you have children as you desire, guess what? Your journey still not. You continue to struggle and wonders. That's a bad news. ask the grandma here. Never ends. This journey just continues. You and I, we think, as if I get hold of this, right? If I get hold of this, right, Sarah, if I can have this son, my life will become joyful and happy. Well, as she wished, they got the result, right? Hagar, the servant lady, she became pregnant. But you know what? Guess what happened to her? When the surrogate, she became conceived the baby, and her mistress, she doesn't. In those days, The woman who cannot bear, child is despised in the sense that it was curse of God. That's how it is perceived. And in my opinion, this southern lady that came from Egypt really didn't have to do much to make Sarah upset. Sarah was looking into herself. God, how come you promised me? But how come all these years nothing is happening to me? But this southern lady who came from Egypt as a slave, she bare my husband's child. Can you see this emotional rises within her heart? And it really doesn't matter how this surrogate mom behaved. To me, maybe she, instir her mind a little bit, but it was all up to Sarah's emotion. And so this struggle began. Sarah couldn't handle it by herself. So she came to Abraham and asked him, man, you gotta take care of this. Guess what Abraham did? She said, well, since you studied this, you take care. That's modern way of translation. Because she belongs to you, do whatever you please with her. Literally, that's what she said. See, as we see, they created this whole problem because they did not recognize God as the perfecter of this covenant. Covenant is that God, He will be the one fulfilling it. They had to put their hands in it to make it happen, and He created a big problem. So second issue is this. Abraham neglected his very basic responsibility of his fatherhood. He's the head of the house. Now, this child that was in Hagar's womb, whose child is this? Abraham. Is this child Hagar's child? Legally speaking, in those days? No. It's not her child. It's her mistress' child, if you will go. But actually further, it is actually Abraham's child. But when Sarah came and asked her what to do with this situation, he literally neglected. Do as you please. And when Sarah was so upset with this answer, she went back and then, guess what she did? She started to torture. Literally torture. And Hagar couldn't stand anymore. Probably she thought she would be dying like this if she stayed in Sarah's house. So she ran away. Can you imagine? Somebody ran away from the house because she feels danger, not safe. That's what happened to her. And she ran away to nowhere to go to actually. It's a slave lady. There's no way to go. It's a wilderness by herself. Obviously, she cried and cried and cried. Guess who heard her cry? God. And God sent His angel and told her, don't worry, you are carrying a son. Name him Ishmael. And I'll make him a great nation. Great nation. That he will be like a donkey, wild donkey. And he will be, in negative translation, he will be always fighting with his brothers. But positive translation, that he will be strong enough to compete with his brothers. I take the later verse translation. And Hagar, for this God to come to her, give her this covenant, it's a miracle. Yeah. So she calls God who come to me and listen to me. Elohi, God who come and hear my cry. But God told her, you need to go back to Sarah. So let me ask you this. Do you think Hagar, did she meet God in the wilderness? Yeah. I think so. I'm confident because what she did after. She went back to Sarah's home. Can you imagine she's going back and realizing that she's walking into lion's den? And until she had the baby, and actually even as she was raising Ishmael, what kind of picture do you see? Do you think Sarah stopped torture her? I don't think so. She continuously gave her a hard time. And she endured, right? Had the baby, named him Ishmael. But what made her endure this time? Because she believed in God's opportune time. The time of covenant, the Kairos time. Well, but actually this whole sermon is not about it. Actually, we need to go back to Abraham. All this was happening. What did he do? He neglected his leadership at his house. Well, this is what I like to deal with a little bit. Many believers who is very faithful, we receive God's great mission. We have greater mission. And sometimes I realize that we forget that God has given us this very basic responsibility. The responsibility of being a husband, responsibility of being a wife, responsibility of being a father. This is very basic leadership that God has given to us. And we are fooling ourselves, not keeping this responsibility, not part with this leadership that is given to us, that we deceive ourselves that we could do greater mission God has given to us. The failure of Aaron is that he ignored even being a father. Ishmael was his child. He made a decision. This was what they were expecting. And he had to jump in and then resolve the conflict between these ladies, basically. Well, I know circumstances may not allow. Maybe he's not wise enough to handle this. But if you really think about it, that's who we are, we as a man, the head of the household. Do you think God made us father or husband because we are able? Let me confess it to you. I don't think so. I always wanted to marry, right? Even that was one thing I knew I wanted to marry, and I'm married. But no one educated me or prepared me to be a husband or father. I mean, there was no education at all. Only thing is what I see through my parents. And so, was I able to be a father or a good husband to anybody? Nah, not at all. And still today, I confess the same thing. I'm not capable of becoming a good father or a good husband. And so it's not about the ability. It's not about can you handle it. It's all about, do you agree this leadership is yours? Do you agree that this leadership is given by God? Aaron had to agree that this is his family. That Ishmael is his child. That he needs to take up this responsibility. Well, he tried, but he may fail. But that's okay. But you cannot neglect it, ignore it, not do anything. Because that not do anything itself is your decision. And so that's the second thing. Well, out of all this, because of that, the third issue rises. As the angel of God came to the wilderness, as the angel blessed her, Hagar. If you listen to it carefully, it is that Hagar, your son will become a great nation, and God will bless that nation multitude. And he will be very strong that he can fight with his brothers. Typically, this kind of covenant was given to who? If you read the Bible stories, if you recall, who deserved to receive this kind of blessings, this kind of covenant? It's normally the man. It is the man, actually. Women don't get this kind of blessings. Sorry to say, but women, you won't count it in those days. Okay? But thing is, what happened to this lady? She received. While this was happening, now let's shift to Abraham. So what happened to him? Isn't Ishmael his son? Isn't he have the right to bless his own child? But is he doing it? No. He's not in his life. He's not in his descendants' privileges and the blessings. He's not in it. The way I look at it is, I think God took away this privilege from him. And his nation, his descendant, Ishmael's descendant is on their own. All of them, God will take care of them. I know some translation, if you guys hear many sermons from other pastors, the descendant of Ishmael, now these days, they have become the descendant of the people who we call Muslims in today's culture. And Abraham's descendant, Isaac's descendant, that we claim ourselves we are. But I think that is a little bit of stretch, a translation there. Because Ishmael's descendant is still Abraham's son. Right? Legally and physically and everything, you know. And they belongs to who? Same as Isaac's children, the descendants. They all belongs to God. And that's why God blessed them and God is with them. And many times we forget the fact that we all are part of God's kingdom. We only think because I have faith in God that we are God's people. But not true. Everything that He has created, which means everybody on the surface of the earth, belongs to who? To God. To God. And so I believe the Muslims and the Ishmael's descendants, if you divide it that, I don't think it would divide that sharply anyway if you do that. But anyway, cannot claim to be look at Ishmael and Hagar's situation as a curse of God. We should not translate that. It is just the outcome of Abraham's and Sarah's mistake, but them to exist and have the blessing of God is never a mistake, because God never made mistakes. Okay, and so one thing that we need to realize that for Abraham, he lost his privilege to bless his descendant. That's what happened. And so what we need to get out of the whole story is that God's covenant is not fulfilled by the will or the strength of man. Basically, I have good news for you. You don't have to do anything to fulfill God's covenant. You don't have to do anything, literally. Even though it says there's many things you have to do, you feel pressure to do, but you don't have to do anything. See, God Himself, in His time, He will be the ones to fulfill this. And that's what we learn from this whole thing. Well, then what do we do as a person who received this covenant from God? What do we do? Believe. Believe and wait and endures and be who we are. Faithful to what we are given to do. That is a basic, simple leadership that is given to us. If you're a child of somebody, you be that child of some. If you're the father of somebody, you be that father. You're husband of somebody, you be that husband. You're a wife of somebody, you be that wife. You're the mom of somebody, you be that mom. And this is faithfully obeying to the covenant of God. Yes, God may give you the greater challenges and vision and mission in life as you travel through this world. But until then, until God fulfills His mission and according to His covenant in your life, all you have to do is just faithful to what's been given to you. You as a student, you as an employee, you as a husband and wife, you feel that duty faithfully. Just like Hagar went back, became the slave to Sarah. It's very hard to do, but she did. That's the obedience. That's what it is called in this whole story. As we are wrapping up this story, one thing that struggles me, but one thing that actually encouraged me is that this man, Abraham, in my opinion, he doesn't deserve God's faith. But did God think same way that I'm doing? No. He still calls in his partner to his covenant. He continued to come and talk to him and initiate this partnership. This to me is grace of God. And if you will think about it, you don't know, you may be in Ishmael's camp, or you may be in Abraham's camp. It really doesn't matter. But one thing about encouraging me is that either camp, God's grace, His love for His people is overflowing. And none of us deserve God's love. None of us deserve God's covenant. But in the eyes of God, everybody deserves His love. In the eyes of God, everybody deserves His covenant. And that's why He's constantly coming to us and trying to tell us that you are worthy. We are worthy of His presence and His Spirit and His prophecies, His companies. I mean, what more do we need in our lives? Wow, you dream to have the best wife in the world. You wait for that lady. Guess what? She will fulfill your life too. No. She brings with you the headaches also. Okay? I'm telling you the truth. Okay? If any man claims that I have no headache with my wife, I won't have a word with him. Vice versa. I mean, we live this life, and there's no way out of it as long as we live this life together this way. Only faithful one, only one that we can trust, only one that we can really hold on to in order for us to secure our happiness is to be with God. Yeah, I waited for that college, I waited for that job, I waited for that wife, but I always felt this void inside my heart, still lonely. And I knew it was a man who would feel this void. Only way that I can quench a little bit of thirst that I had all in me was when I surrendered to God, when I live with God and walk with God. So that's my encouragement to you. If you feel unhappy in this life, turn your eyes to God, and trust His covenant that's given to us. Then you may feel a little bit better. Then you may feel content with the life. Then you may find that happiness that you are looking for. Let's pray.